The difference between a shutdown and a meltdown. I'm sure many of you who are on the autism spectrum, or many of you who know individuals on the autism spectrum, have experienced shutdowns and meltdowns. I am going to talk about what shutdowns and meltdowns are exactly, talk about the differences, and how to cope with them if you're a person on the autism spectrum or know someone who's on the autism spectrum. Shutdowns. I'm sure you've heard the term a lot. What are they exactly? Well, shutdowns can happen to anyone. However, it is more of a common occurrence for people with autism. Shutdowns are caused by an extreme level of stress to the point a person is no longer able to cope with the stressful situation. This can be an accumulation of stressful events or can be caused by a trigger from a past stressful event. A shutdown is a response to when a person reaches a crisis point. When a person has a shutdown, most of the person's cognitive processes become harder to perform. It is like when you have a computer and you have too many apps open, and the ability of your computer to be able to process it slows down and eventually crashes. That is kind of like a person with a shutdown. They will feel like they will need to partially or completely withdraw from the world for a bit of time. They may often retreat into a room, head to a quiet place during a social event, or lay in their bed. Oftentimes, they may struggle to even remove themselves from a situation that's causing the stress in order to retreat because the cognitive abilities can become shut down more during shutdown. They may even struggle to communicate. They may struggle to articulate their words as usual or even struggle to talk at all. This can make it tough for a person to communicate what they're feeling to others, and this can worsen the situation. Unlike a meltdown though, a shutdown may not be noticeable to others. It can appear invisible to another person unless that person really pays close attention to their behavior or the person actually communicates what they're feeling. Shutdowns can often lead to meltdowns. How do you cope with shutdowns? To cope with a shutdown, it is very important for the person who experiences a shutdown to take a break from the situation so they can recharge and recover from the stress. If you are shutting down, try to remove yourself from the situation causing the stress or triggers, because there's a higher chance you will feel worse if you stay. Go to a quiet place like a bathroom or a car. Sometimes it can be difficult to detect when a shutdown is coming. To help detect the early signs, pay attention to your feelings. Do you feel an increase of anxiety, stress, or irritability? If so, it might not be because of a normal irritation such as a rude person blocking a shopping aisle, but something more pertain to an overall stimulation or an accumulation of stressful events during the day. Do you suddenly find it harder to communicate? Does your cognitive processing seem to go slower and it's suddenly harder to think things through? Do you suddenly notice yourself being sensitive to everything? Are you suddenly feeling clumsy and about to bump into things? These are all additional signs that will tell you that you're shutting down. These can be used as indicators. If you're someone who knows someone with autism, it may be harder to notice these indicators and signs, but with careful attention, you may pick up on these early signs too, and that way you can help that person, and that will be a win-win situation. Now I'm going to talk about meltdowns. Like shutdowns, meltdowns are caused by an extreme level of stress, but when a meltdown happens, the stress has pushed a person past the ability to cope by simply shutting down. It is almost like the next step. Instead, the person will then act outwardly in an anxious and aggressive way. A person melting down often shows extreme behavior like shouting, aggressive behavior, extreme forms of outbursts, crying, and self-harm. During meltdowns, there may be an increased risk of harm for that person or people around them. This can be distressing to the person with autism as well as the people around them. Like shutdowns, meltdowns can happen to anyone, but it's more common with people with autism. So how do you cope with meltdowns? Like shutdowns, it is important to get yourself out of the situation that is causing the stress and eventual meltdown. It is important to help the person who is having the meltdown to get them out of the situation that is causing the stressful event. It is important to take a break to decompress from the stress or help the other person do that. Give yourself the other person time to calm down. Having a meltdown can be embarrassing, and it can create shame due to society's expectations to act in a certain way that's considered appropriate. If you have had a meltdown, forgive yourself and let go of any guilt you had about the meltdown. Understand it actually wasn't your fault. even though you may think it was. But instead realize that if anybody was in that stressful situation, they would respond in that extreme stress too. If you see someone else having a meltdown, let them deal with the meltdown in their own way. Do not touch them, or else they can make them feel worse unless they ask them that they want to be hugged or tap on their shoulder to make them feel better. Give them space and let them know you are trying to be supportive. Keep calm. Don't ask them too many questions because that will make them even more overwhelmed. Give them time to withdraw and recover. Don't tell them they're bad for acting that way. If you do feel angry, don't let them know that at the time because it really isn't their fault. They didn't want to act that way. And like I said before, they were simply responding in a normal humanistic way from an extreme amount of stress that pretty much anyone would in that amount of stress. Meltdowns can sometimes be followed by a period of shutdown. This shutdown period can last for a few hours to a couple of days even. It is important to allow yourself or the other person to recover in this period, or else you will risk having another meltdown. I want to conclude by saying meltdowns are not temper tantrums. They are not people acting mean out of spite. People that have meltdowns are not bad people for having them. It doesn't mean you're radioactive. Instead, this is actually a normal human type behavior. It is a normal human response when a person encounters an extreme amount of stress. So, if you ever have a meltdown, be gentle on yourself. Forgive yourself. Don't think you're bad. If you see a person having a meltdown, understand that they aren't being bad, but just simply struggling to handle a very stressful situation that pretty much anyone would do the same if they encounter that situation. While I talked about the differences between shutdowns and meltdowns, and then briefly talked about some different ways to cope with them. If you want to learn more ways on how to cope with meltdowns, I have provided a link to another video, how to deal with meltdowns, in the link right here, as well as in the description. If you want to learn more in-depth detail on how to cope with anxiety, please check out my video on how to cope with anxiety and how to experience greater happiness and joy, which provides excellent tips in how you can immediately feel better during a stressful situation right now. If you have any other ideas you want to share, please share them in the comments below. Not only that can help me create future videos that can help other people, but it can also help a lot of people right now too. And that can help people reach their fullest potential and thus make the world a better place. If you found this video helpful, please give this video a like and share them with a friend. I also have many other videos about autism and how to cope with various challenges such as anxiety, multitasking, change, and a bunch of other things on the autism spectrum too. So please check them out. Well, please stay healthy, safe, embrace your interests, and most importantly, love yourself. Well, thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.